So first, one of the things that always people are coming up to are, planning, and it is the bane of existence for anybody on the SFC teams. When I was VP of high performance, I would see a number of different formats. One, I swear somebody scratched it out on a napkin and then transferred it to a single piece of paper and just sort of handed it back. There's a lot of variety. Then we get some really in-depth ones. Some are more textual, some are more like a project plan and the YTP and Excel. There's a lot of different ways of approaching it. I'm going to be talking about some of the thought behind what you should be doing as opposed to how you fill out a form. So there's a big caveat. Periodization, as we understand it, is a tool for enhancing physical capacities. Like if you read Bompa's Periodization, or you read any of the material on peaking and tapering, it is all about strength, endurance, and energy systems. It's well grounded in the Olympic motto of higher, faster, stronger. We're really looking at a lot of, I should say, we lack a lot of research on how to develop motor skills or mental training using periodization. Even pulling up, hitting a research database probably within the last 2 months, I pulled out 2 papers out of the zillions that I have that will address skill acquisition or mental training in a periodization format. There's not a lot there, but the overwhelming majority is on enhancing physical capabilities. So that being said, we have to ask ourselves the questions of what is the applicability of such terms as loading, intensity, supercompensation, tapering, peaking, all of these different terms. How do they fit into your annual training plan as a precision sport shooting athlete? That being said, don't ignore periodization as a concept. We're going to use that concept to look at what matters to shooters. So within motor skills, what we do want to do is we want to break down the training period into distinct phases and each having specific goals. Okay. General prep is different than main competition, vastly different in how we're going to approach that time frame. So an example might be an initial phase might focus on building fundamental skills and techniques, and a later phase will be looking at refinement. We'll see how that applies in a more graphic sense soon. When we look at training load progression, the load is going to be progressing over time. And instead of talking about intensity, I love it. I remember when we were designing the coaching program, we talked about, well, how do you vary the intensity of trigger pull? It's a concept that defies explanation. We had 4 or 5 coaches in the room, and we tried to figure out how you could do that. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at a gradual increase in the complexity or difficulty of the task being performed, and another way is, the environment that it's performed within. So let's take a look at what the annual plan usually looks like. We see the preparation phase made up of general prep, specific prep, and pre-competition. Then we'll see regular competition and major competition. And then we usually go into a transition phase where we have active rest with recuperation and then active rest with planning. Now, this is out of the NCCP documentation. It has changed over the last few years, minor tweaks in how it breaks out. But I'm going to ask you to consider something else. And this is usually how, when I see an annual plan, it immediately starts off with preparation, goes into competition, and then sort of transition, it fades out. What I would like people to think of is start thinking with transition, okay? Because first, we need that active rest and recuperation. We need you to actively plan for and engage in getting healthy again. If you've got damage to your shoulders, if you are burnt out, you need rest. We need to address those issues up front. Then, before we go into preparation, while you're resting, we want you to actually start your planning, okay? Because most times, I think people are handing in their annual plans, I think it's February 10th. Well, that's deep into your preparation, your general prep. So if you're still planning and in preparation, there's a good chance that there is an overlap that is being missed. Then we go into preparation. So general prep, as we talked about, and then go into competition. Okay, and that ends at the end of your event. Your main event that you've set your goals on. It could be the national championships, if that's where you're going. It could be provincial championships. It could be any number of major events that you want to showcase your talents. But instead of ending with transition, let's start with transition and use that proactively and deliberately. You're going to hear deliberate a lot during this conversation. I'd also like you to think of this in the sense of a pyramid, okay? Everything is foundational, okay? We start at the bottom with active rest and recuperation, then planning, then through our prep phases, finally into our competition phases. Everything builds on what preceded it. If you miss something in general prep, it will rear its ugly head in specific, possibly in competition. So you really want to be thinking about what is taking place at this period and what's coming up next, and how do I prepare for that? How do I plan it? In our case, what we're going to be looking at is, near the bottom in preparation, we're going to be looking at mental, motor, and mental skill acquisition. Okay, we're going to be picking up new skills, dusting off our old ones. Then we're going to work at retaining those skills, but then refining it. And then finally, we're going to be transferring those skills into a performance environment, where we have those competitions. That is where you're driving. Now, at the base of those, we're going to be considering technical, tactical, mental, and physical components for your annual plan. You could think of it similar to your YTP. You've got a calendar and then a series of objects. Okay, you could have numbers in those cells, but what I want you to think about is conceptually, what are you doing in those areas? It's funny, people will be unable to articulate what they need to do in specific prep, where just tell me what you're doing. That should be crystal clear in your mind. I know, as a former HP guy, I want to see that plan. But more than anything, I want you to live that plan, which means you need to understand your plan. So let's take a look at general prep within preparation phase. Usually you're looking at 6 to 8 weeks of time for that general preparation phase. At a high level, what you're doing is you're looking at the progressive development of physical conditioning adapted to sport. Okay, it's generalized. Okay, you probably need to develop core strength, low level, balance training, low level, and just really in a generally applicable fashion. You'll be looking at specific development of primary physical, mental, motor, and athletic abilities required for the sport. Okay. You're going to be identifying some of the areas that you need to work on, and we will be talking about weak points. I know that's sort of a verboten phrase for some people, but identifying and eliminating weakness is exactly what performance improvement is about. So you're going to identify and improve things that you need to work on. Anything you come into the game with, you want to consolidate that. Looking at new tactical abilities and knowledge. And as you progress, you're going to start off light, shorter practices. You can have them slightly less infrequent, but you're going to be going up with the frequency and the duration of those practices over time. As I said, progressive increase in activity intensity, approaching competition level at the end of the phase. So as you exit pre-competition, you should be at an intensity which is similar, but not quite at the competition level. From a technical standpoint, you're going to return to the basics and build consistency in process and execution. Okay. You really want to have a well-defined process. Why? It's easier to see aberrations when you have a consistent delivery. We're going to be looking at, you want to stress technical perfection and development over immediate scores. I'd rather see a smooth trigger that's, punches the 9 that you were aiming at as opposed to a lucky 10. You know what I mean by that? I think we've all seen that before. Lots of group shooting and dry firing, and also looking at non-discipline specific shooting exercises. Volume and trigger time is important, but don't overdo it. Remember, you're easing back into the sport, so you don't want to break yourself. General prep is where you make equipment changes. If anything's happening, that's what you do. Get all your fixes in place. If you need a new grip, you need a new barrel, get all that stuff put together now. I'd also say really take a close look at your backup equipment to make sure that it's functional, and work with it a bit too, especially now because you're just trying to see how everything feels. If you go into a match with your backup gun because something got broken and you've never shot it, you're in trouble. Your confidence is going to be at a very low stage. You should learn or review the basics of firearm maintenance. And, I've walked in and people didn't know how to change their sights or didn't know what was the impact of 3 clicks up and 2 to the left. You need to know that. You need to be able to clean your gun, clean your magazines so that they remain at their optimal operations. It's the worst I ever saw was at the Canadian Nationals. A gentleman kept on changing his sights and nothing was happening, so he eventually went to Kentucky Windage where he held off of the 10 and managed to shoot okay. He came off the line and his rear sights actually fell off his gun. It wasn't attached well to his pistol, and when he was making changes, it had no impact because it wasn't affixed to the gun. That should never happen. If you're going to think of anything new for your technique, you need time to ingrain those changes and determine whether or not they are valid. So you're going to do that in general prep as well. If you are a air pistol guy and you're thinking you want to try out rapid fire, now's the time to give it a go. Let's take a look at specific prep. Again, we're looking at general development of physical, motor, and mental. Progressive increase in quantity of work done during practice, improvement of athletes' weak points. Again, you should have identified them. You're going to improve those, how you respond to those. What's important is that every time you make an improvement and you've solidified and you've retained that improvement, you need to reassess, re-benchmark your capabilities and now determine what is the lowest on the pole that needs to be fixed. So it's a constant change of benchmarking, analysis, and then work on that thing. Establishment of general objectives. General prep is going to be kind of a lot of the time by yourself, but we tend to travel as a team. We tend to work with other athletes. So it's a good idea to start to develop those personal bonds because I've seen people be able to rely upon their friends at a major competition. And I've also seen ongoing grudges that detract from performance. So, if you can develop those interpersonal bonds within the team, you definitely need to do that. Okay, so from a technical standpoint for specific prep, you're going to narrow the techniques and the equipment options that you've been selecting, you've been testing in general prep. Shooting exercises are going to be becoming more sport specific. So when we talked about general prep, you might be just shooting without any time limits. When we start to get into specific prep and pre-competition, you're starting to match those conditions. So let's say that for sport pistol, you have to fire 5 shots in 5 minutes. In general prep, you take as much time as you need. In specific prep, maybe you say, I want those good shots in 5 to 8 minutes. In pre-competition phase, you are getting all of your shots off within those 5 minutes. Plus, from a tactical standpoint, you're also learning how to address some of the issues that may eat up your time. So, as I said here, for standard rapid fire, learn, review, sustain fire without time limits, practice performance without event restrictions. I've had people practice precision on a rapid fire target so they can get used to the sight picture. The precision target, as we know, is pretty small. The rapid fire is just a big black circle. It's a different view. Also, sometimes people go from a sub-6 to a center of mass hold. So we want to be able to imprint that rapid fire sight picture in their mind. And when you've only got 3 seconds to do that, it doesn't really stick. So as I said, shoot slow fire and rapid fire targets. You can shoot donuts, where what you actually do is you take a paper target. Don't do this with electric. Take a paper target, kind of ring out that you want to get all of your shots in. So let's say that we want to shoot 9 or better. We shoot out anything that would count as a scratch 9. Throw out the center of the target, and you shoot at that. And as long as you're getting your shots in the donut and not marking the paper, you continue using that target. As soon as you throw one outside or cut the paper, you replace that target, count off how many shots you had, and you try to improve the number you go through. The main thing is you're trying to work on delivery without expectations of score. You can look at groups, what are the size, where are the placements. Again, we're not looking at score, not during specific prep or general prep. We're looking at those other performance outcomes. You can generate benchmark performance metrics off of the SCAT, or another product we'll be talking about briefly is the Mantis X. Again, you're looking at your ability to perform, not related to score. And start to get familiar again with either the new rules or the old rules, just so that you're up to speed when you go to a competition. Majorly, if you're doing something different with your equipment, make sure that your equipment is rules compliant at this stage. So if you have to make any modifications, such as maybe using an NRA grip, which is longer than an ISSF grip, you can make the change to that grip so that it passes weapons check. Finally, we go into pre-competition. Oh, I should mention that specific prep is about 3 to 5 weeks, and pre-comp is about 2 to 3 weeks. Generally speaking, it is preparing those athletes for future competitions. Maintenance of low or moderate important skills. It's like you're not going to be running marathons, but you're going to be jogging to keep up your aerobic capacity. Unlike Mark, you're not going to play hockey. We want to be working on those motor skills and mental abilities. If there's anything specific to pistol shooting, One thing that comes to mind is raising the pistol in rapid fire. It's a grinder for your shoulder. And as you go into finals in women's 25-meter pistol in the rapid fire stage, the finals are about shooting and shooting and shooting. So, you do want to keep on working on your shoulders and your core to just maintain that ability specific to what you're doing with the sport. You want to remain, keep everything consolidated, everything you've worked on. Increase activity intensity to be at the competition level. Stabilization of quantity of work. You're not going to just keep on going up. You're not going to have any big drops. You're just going to be focusing on that level of intensity that you've established that puts you into a good performance frame. Start to become really picky about the performance objectives that are specific to the sport. We've had some athletes that are just shooting right up to the last second of their time period. If anything goes wrong or if they get distracted, they're putting themselves in danger. So, you have to be able to look at aborts, shots delivered, maybe clearing a malfunction in the precision stage. You have to take these into consideration, know what works for you, and then be able to apply that in an actual competition. And then stress management and emotional control. That's going to be paramount at this stage. You have to be mentally strong. You have to be able to account for these things. And then again, with the group, cooperation within the group. Especially if you're now in one of the team events, but certainly just team cohesion, working with your peers, your coach, the folks in the office, the whole 9 yards. Cooperation within that group is going to be terribly important. Technically, you want to fine-tune the skills and determine where the athlete truly stands. Going into a competition, you should know roughly your bandwidth, a pretty tight bandwidth of where you're performing. Okay, and that's important to know because you're going to start thinking, well, ideally what you're not going to do is you're not going to set expectations dramatically higher than where you currently are. If you have goals that are very high, let's say you want to shoot a national team, you're applying for the national team and you want to have a score that's high. If it is dramatically higher than what you're capable of doing, the level of stress and the impact on performance is going to be dramatic. So you need to know where you are so you can right size your goals and approach those. But it's all, where do you stand performance-wise? Comparative assessments are critical. How are you doing? And that's really handy if you've got a use of an electronic trainer. You can compare your hold versus other people's holds. You can compare your, parameters over time. Are you developing? Are you stabilizing? Hopefully you're not declining. If you are, what do we need to do to change and turn that around? I've seen athletes in really bad situations just carrying on like nothing was wrong. Typically what you'll see is you're grouping to the left and you just don't do anything about it. You're just shot after shot after shot keeps on going left. You have to be able to rationalize, what do you need to do to get those shots into the tent? Because now we are talking about score. We are looking at rankings. We are looking at placement within the competition and ultimately within the team itself. So you have to be able to say, what do I need to do? In the case of the individual that had their rear sights broken, you never want to recommend Kentucky windage, holding off and shooting the center. His sights weren't working. He kind of froze as to why it wasn't working, but he came up with a remedy that kept him in the game. That is a critical competitive capacity. Okay, so whatever it takes to win, shy of doing something inappropriate. Okay. In the pre-competition phase, we're going to start doing match simulations with scores. We're going to have timing being strictly followed, rule enforcement. So if you don't like something, you're going to find out about it at this stage. Whenever possible, incorporate all facets of the match into the simulation. So that can include noise, officials interrupting you, music in the background, you know, whatever you might expect, do that. You know, there's nothing like having somebody declaring that their position has failed and you have to go to a hospital position and set up all over again. That may happen. That's a great simulation. You know, you may compete in minor matches, and it's not about competing, it's about practicing to compete. So what do you do on the day of? What is your match plan? Are you following your shot plan? Are you getting there and, you know, going through your pre-performance routines? You're practicing competing, okay? So you need to look at these as opportunities to learn, and don't get caught up in winning or losing. That's for later, and hopefully you're not going to do that at all. But this is about learning. This is about, you know, practicing what you're going to be doing later. And actual tactical work will be solidly introduced. Okay, so general advice. During the preparation phase, especially at the onset, we want to develop a duplicable, consistent form in your performance. I should be able to look at you and notice when something's off. You should be able to do the same thing, whether I've got you on video, I've got you on a stopwatch, I'm watching your form. So we're going to start with natural point of aim. I want to see point of initiation and termination of raise, just so you know what I'm talking about. Hopefully I can do this. So when I'm down here, I'll get my position set. And when I'm ready, my grip is ready, I've got everything worked out. That is my international ready position, and that's my point of initiation. I'm going to start my raise, and that's going to go up above the target. How high is up to you. In Canada, you'll get flagged for going above the target. Then you're going to start your actual target approach. And that's where I lower the pistol down into my area of aim. I'm going to establish and sustain my hold while I get my sight picture. And while that's going on, I'm going to initiate my trigger squeeze. That's most easily described through time. If I've got a stopwatch on you, I can break down your shots. I should be able to identify where you are within that process and see whether or not things are going well. So this is what you want to be able to do. I want to highlight again, duplicable and consistent. If you get that down in your head, when you're having an off day, you'll probably notice when it's tied to one of those inconsistencies. Now, research either establishes correlations or proves a relationship. With higher scores in the following cases. And I want to say that there's correlations and then there's relationships. They do a check on balance was a really good one. They found that elite pistol shooters, air pistol shooters, perform better in a stork test, a balance test, than non-elite shooters. Now, is it because they trained balance, which could be evidenced through a stork test, or did these guys practice doing a stork test and that made them better shooters? Probably not, but there's a relationship. Similarly, there have been programs where they took junior shooters and, you know, maybe gave them core strength training and balance training, and they showed an improvement in their shooting capacity over similar juniors who were not involved in that program. So, you know, there's people that are good are able to do this. And then there's also, when we subject people to this form of training, they improve. So generally speaking, if you want to have increased pistol performance as seen with SCORE, we're going to be looking at balance training, general core strength, that's in your legs, abdomen, and your shoulders, upper body shoulder strength. Okay, so it's not just you've got them tight, you want them to be able to, we're looking at a little bit of max strength. Grip strength has been correlated to pistol performance, and then aerobic capacity. One of the nice things about aerobic capacity is that you can have an extended respiratory pause, so you can hold your breath longer without craving oxygen. You need to start mental training now. Starting mental training as you're going out to the match is a recipe for disaster. Okay, so some of the things you're going to work on your shooting diary, and we're going to do a lot of self-reflection in that. It's not just on January 25th, I did this. That's just a shopping list. You need to think about what was the impact of what you did. What did you learn from doing this? Any opportunities for improvement, any strengths that you have, and then most importantly, how can you apply this on your next training session? Because what you want is, you don't want to have just a series of dots along a line of, I did this, I did this, I did this. I did this, therefore I'll do this, therefore I do this, therefore I do this. You want to tie in all of those training instances into a continuous line as opposed to a series of isolated events. Positive self-talk. There's no value in beating yourself up on the line. Deep breathing for relaxation. And also it can be used as a timing gauge. Visualizing performance. And then very importantly, pre-performance routines and focus plans. If you have problems in your performance and you're working on this, it's not a one and done training exercise. You will not fix something and ingrain that change with one trip out to the range. You're probably going to need 4 to 8 sessions each over a period of time to ingrain that and get an actual improvement. Don't judge the success on your first iteration. Judge your improvement over time, because that's what you're building towards. So it's never one and done. And, after corrections are established, reevaluate and select a new relative weakness to eliminate. That is, in a very quick 40 minutes or 35 minutes, annual training.